In this part of the lesson, we're going to look at different common data problems that can occur when data isn't properly stored. This will help us better motivate the need for the entity relationship diagram and the usefulness of a relational style database. If you open up the Data Issues workbook provided under Chapter 3 on Blackboard, you can see the following data snapshot. To get our bearings, we are in a worksheet that shows a table. We're not yet in a database, but in order to visually see some of the data problems that can occur, I think it's best to start here. So whenever you get data, the first question you want to ask yourself is, what exactly am I looking at? If you haven't seen the Harry Potter movies, here what we have are several people that are involved with the Hogwarts University. So if you look in these columns, you can see the names of different people that are involved, the affiliation that they have, the role that they play. So here we have students and professors. And then we have some additional information about courses. So the unspoken knowledge here is that we have students that are taking courses, and we have professors that are teaching courses. So once you kind of oriented yourself to the data, we can now ask some questions. Asking some questions of the data will help us better understand the quality of its organization. So the first question we have is, what is Hermione Granger's role at Hogwarts? So what we'll do is we'll take a look manually. We can see Hermione Granger's name, and we see that she is a student. Now in doing so, if we kind of glance, we see that there's a piece of missing information here. And so this is where we want to start building a list of different problems that we can have with the data. So the first thing we notice here is we have missing data. So this is going to be what we call an issue of completeness. Okay, so an issue of data completeness when we are missing information. Okay, our next question is, which other people have the role of student at Hogwarts? So if we scan the list, we can see student, student, student. We have Hermione Granger. We have Harry Potter. We also have a student called Barry Motter. So if you're familiar with the universe, this is probably not a real student. Sometimes you'll be familiar with the people working in your organization. You can tell that this is probably not accurate. So what we have here is an issue of data accuracy. So when something is not correct. The other thing that you'll notice while we're scanning all of the different pieces of data is that we have repeated information. So I think if I had just the student's last name, at least with this section of data, I would be able to tell both the house and the role of the student. This wouldn't be the case, obviously, if we had two students with the same first name, but in this case we don't. So we really don't need to be repeating this information over and over again. It's taking up excess space. So this repeated information is indicative of what we call a data redundancy problem. We had mentioned this in the previous lesson, and it's something that we're going to see how to resolve using the entity relationship modeling technique. So now we move to our last question. We can see that we have Pomona Sprout stored in this table as a professor of herbology. And if you haven't read the books or seen the movie, this is a person that eventually was no longer teaching this course. And so here we have what's referred to as an issue of timeliness. So the data is not up to date. So far we have looked at 4 different issues: completeness, where we're missing data; accuracy, where we have data that is incorrect; redundancy, where we have unnecessarily repeated data; and timeliness, where we know that the data that we have is not up to date. So let's take a look at the next data sheet, the orders worksheet. We have 2 different tables. We have a table that contains order number information with a date, how the order was paid for, and the order total. And in the second table, we have the order number, the product associated with the order, the quantity of product, and the price. And if we take a closer look, we can see that all of these order numbers are the same. Now that in itself is not an issue, because we can see that this is basically telling us for this particular order, 11,356, that we have 4 products on that order, and they have the following prices. Now, if we kind of step back and look at both the tables together, we can start to see that there might be an issue here. Basically, if we take this order number and we look at the other table, we can see here we have 11,356. We have the date, we have the payment type, and then we look at the total, and you can see that the total is $220.75. Now, this value is clearly much lower than the values that we have for individual items that are on the order. So that is probably an issue. And what we have here is an issue of consistency. So basically, we have a situation in which the total doesn't match the addition of all the prices of the items on the order. So we have an inconsistency here. So our last data problem that we have is that of consistency. So if we take a look at the third worksheet in the workbook, we can see we have first names, last names, street addresses, and phone numbers. So the question is, what kinds of issues do we have with the data? So we can see that we do have a blank spot, blank cell here. So we do have some incomplete data, assuming that McFly has a first name. So there we have an issue of data completeness. If we take a closer look at the data, we see that we have a letter inside the phone number here, so B11. So we have an issue of accuracy. That's not an accurate phone number. We can see that we have 2 records that are identical. So we have an issue of redundancy. We don't have any way of knowing if this is up-to-date information, so we can't determine whether or not we have a timeliness issue. And we don't really have a way to compare 2 things that don't match up, so we don't have any consistency issues either. But we do have missing data, we have data that's not accurate, and we have redundant data. We have repeated records. If you're wondering about the phone number for James Carter in this cell here, we are missing the area code, but because the data is stored there and it is incorrect, this is actually an issue of data accuracy. So we have a phone number that's incorrect for James Carter. So that is an issue of accuracy. When you're completing your reflection in Blackboard for this lesson, what I would like you to do is consider this question on this worksheet. So here we have some data for 3 doctors and 3 patients. We have an ID for each person, and we have a set of rules on the side here. So what I would like you to do is organize the data as best you can so that if you look at it again, you can tell quite simply, without the set of rules, which patients a doctor treats and which doctor each patient sees. And when you're done, go ahead and upload a screenshot of the results. So please don't upload the entire workbook. Just take a shot of the image of how you've stored it and then upload that to Blackboard. The upload is provided directly inside of the reflection questions.